Hello and welcome to today's webinar on how to implement and maintain a modern CAPA system while avoiding common pitfalls. My name is John Spear and I'm the founder here at Greenlight Guru, and I'll be the moderator and the presenter for today's event. And thank you all so much for signing up and tuning in. I know it's an interesting time in all of our worlds these days, and it's still an opportunity to hopefully learn about opportunities to improve our businesses. And today we're going to learn a whole bunch about CAPA. We've got a really special presentation scheduled for you today. I know I'm really looking forward to diving into some key quality and regulatory aspects around the topic of CAPA and sharing some best tips to help you avoid some common mistakes and improve existing processes as I show you how to help make your CAPA system world-class. Before we dive too deep into today's presentation, I'm going to touch on a few items real quick. First, today's webinar is going to last for about 60 minutes in total, and we'll include a Q&A session at the end where I'll answer as many of your questions as I can, time permitting. So I encourage you to submit your questions throughout the webinar as they come up in the box on the right-hand side, and we will get to as many of them as time permits. Second, I just want to share a few words about Greenlight Guru and why we put on these free training sessions. If you've been on one of our training sessions before, then you know we put these on because improving the quality of life is our mission here at Greenlight Guru. And this is likely a mission that's very similar to many of you and your companies participating in today's webinar. So anything that we can do as an organization that helps medical device makers bring safer, life-changing devices to market faster and with less risk aligns with that overall mission. We're constantly looking for ways to fulfill that mission, whether that's through hosting these free training sessions, through partnering with world-class medical device companies, through our award-winning quality management system software. If you'd like to learn more about why medical device companies all over the world are moving away from paper-based and general-purpose quality management tools and adopting the purpose-built medical device quality management software from Greenlight Guru, then I would encourage you to head on over to www.greenlight.guru after today's presentation to schedule your free personalized one-on-one demo. In doing so, you'll learn how the very best medical device companies are leveraging the Greenlight Guru medical device quality management software to gain ISO 13485 certification, market clearances and approvals, breeze through audits, and push beyond just compliance to produce true quality medical devices. So again, if you're interested in learning how we can help your medical device company, make sure to visit www.greenlight.guru after today's webinar and schedule your personalized demo. Before we kick off today's presentation, let me give you a little bit of background about myself in case this is your first time hearing about Greenlight Guru and learning a little bit about my area of expertise and experience in the medical device industry. As I mentioned, my name is John Spear, and I will be presenting the webinar today on CAPA. I am the founder at Greenlight Guru. I have over 22 years of experience in the medical device industry, specifically with quality management, product development, and project management at several companies, large and small, where I manage multiple projects, took medical device concepts through development, regulatory submissions, and ultimately to market. My expertise is in the design and implementation of FDA and ISO compliant quality management systems. You might have seen some of my content contributions that have been published in the industry news sites such as Quality Digest, MedTech Intelligence, MedDevice Online, and many more. I'm also the host of the #1 podcast in the medical device industry, the Global Medical Device Podcast. So if you've not checked that out, be sure to go find the Global Medical Device Podcast wherever you happen to be listening to podcasts, and you'll surely find it. And if not, definitely send me a note and I'll make sure to get you connected to that podcast as well. So without further ado, let me dive into how to implement and maintain a modern CAPA system while avoiding common pitfalls. All right, some topics we're going to cover today. We're going to talk a little bit about the regulatory focus on CAPA. We're going to give you a little bit of an overview, give you some pointers or point you in the direction of where you can learn more about the specific regulations and requirements. defining CAPA. I'm going to talk a little bit about some of the challenges and problems that are seen and observed, both from an auditor perspective, but also from my firsthand experience with CAPA processes. We'll talk a little bit about the importance and the relationship that CAPA has with your other quality management system procedures and processes. Risk management, yeah, this is all the rage these days, of course. So certainly something that's very important to consider risk with respect to CAPA. We'll talk a little bit about that. And one of the big things is really about moving more to the PA side of CAPA, the preventive side, proactive side, and certainly we'll talk a little bit about that as well. And then we'll go through CAPA process step by step, give you some tips and pointers, and then, like I mentioned, some Q&A. One common question that I get that I should have mentioned at the intro is, yes, this session is being recorded. Yes, the slides, the recording, all of that information will be provided to you in your email inbox, probably later today, certainly before the end of the week. And for those colleagues and friends that maybe didn't have a chance to participate in the session live today, Greenlight Guru, as with all of our webinars, will be publishing this on our website, and it'll be available on demand. So you can watch this, your friends and colleagues can watch this at a future date and time if they so desire. So let's dive right into the regulatory focus on CAPA. A little bit of data here about CAPA, specifically from an FDA perspective. If you ever pay attention to FDA 43 observation, warning letter data, things of that nature, year after year after year, I think for probably 10 or 15 years now, CAPA is always at or very near the top of the systemic issues that are observed from an FDA inspection standpoint. Now, I wish we had this sort of data from an ISO audit perspective. To my knowledge, I'm not aware of any resource that publishes ISO audit findings. If any of you happen to know of such a source, please send that over to me. I'd love to dive in and evaluate that. But CAPA, lack of or inadequate CAPA procedures time and time again is one of the biggest issues from an FDA perspective. And kind of makes sense though, and I'll talk a little bit more about this throughout today's presentation, but CAPA is one of those systems that FDA is always going to evaluate from their inspection point of view. So it's certainly an area that needs to be buttoned up, dialed in, streamlined, optimized, because it will be evaluated during every regulatory body audit that you're ever going to go through. Couple of links included here, and again, this is going to be in the slides that you'll get after today's presentation, but these are links to actual FDA data. You can peruse and dive in and analyze all of that warning letter and 43 data to your heart's content. So let me give you a little bit of an overview of CAPA, for posterity's sake, that give you the actual places where the regulations speak about CAPA. I'm not going to read this. You can certainly do so either as I'm chatting or later, or maybe you've already got this regulation memorized. But CAPA is addressed in FDA 21 CFR Part 820.100, and it goes through all the criteria that's important about your CAPA process. By the same token, 1345 2016 has actually two sections related to CAPA. First, 8.5.2 for corrective action, and then 8.5.3 for preventive action. The EU regulation also speaks a little bit about CAPA as well. Again, all of these FDA, ISO, EU, for the most part, are in sync with respect to the requirements and expected behaviors when it comes to CAPA. So again, 820.100, 1345, 8.5.2, and 8.5.3, and then the EU regulation as you see on screen. Another really great resource is the guidance document. This particular guidance document has a little bit of age to it. It's almost 10 years old, but it's still somewhat timeless, if you will. And this is was originally published by an organization called the Global Harmonization Task Force, GHTF. That organization has been replaced by an organization called IMDRF, and I believe their website is imdrf.org, where they have this CAPA guidance along with a lot of other guidance documents. But I think this is really a really insightful piece. Even though it is 10 years old, we as an industry are still struggling with this acronym of CAPA because it seems to put a heavier emphasis on correcting issues rather than preventing them. And again, that's part of the intent behind today's session, is to talk a little bit about that. Another really good resource for you to consult from a regulatory point of view is the FDA's Quality System Inspection Technique Guidance Document, or QSIT, and has a fair amount of discussion around CAPA as well. The one comment on the QSIT that I think is really insightful is that the health of your business or the health of your quality management system is really a direct reflection of how robust and thorough and complete your CAPA process is. So said another way, that the CAPA process gives a view or a lens into the health of your quality system and ultimately your business. So it's important to really think about or understand how regulators are looking at CAPA with respect to your overall business and your overall quality management systems. So let's dive into some of the 5 biggest challenges or problems that exist with respect to CAPA. First item, lack of cross-functionality. So what do we mean by that? I think a lot of times when companies engage or initiate a CAPA, that they do so in such a way that puts a lot of the responsibility on the quality team within an organization. And a lot of times, while quality may kind of project manage and lead the CAPA initiative, if they're doing it by themselves or in a silo, then it kind of misses the point. Again, going back to this concept that a CAPA is a direct reflection of the health of your quality management system. And there's an expectation that within a business that all of the appropriate functions and resources are aware of and involved with and following your particular quality management system, including top executive management within your organization. So it's really important that anytime you and your company identify the need for a corrective action or preventive action of some sort, that you consider and incorporate cross-functionality as part of the initiative. Make sure the right resources are involved. If it's a manufacturing issue, well, manufacturing resources should be involved in addressing and mitigating the particular area of concern that the CAPA is intended to address. So just factor that in. Make sure you have a robust cross-functional team. I think this particular problem is probably still, even today in 2020, the biggest problem or challenge or obstacle with CAPA, and that is we react to events that have happened rather than predict or be proactive or preventive in nature. And maybe it has to do with the acronym, corrective action, preventive action. We put more emphasis on the CA side than the PA side. But I think another thing that lends itself to this being a real challenge or problem for us in the medical device industry is that, sadly, sometimes we are not incented or motivated necessarily to address something until it becomes a problem. And if you think about improving the quality of life as a mission of your organization, then you want to get ahead of things before they become actual problems. I mean, nothing's worse than a device being in the hands of a clinician being used on a patient in a procedure and learning that something didn't go as expected. Wouldn't it be nice to have a leading indicator of a particular challenge or obstacle or an impediment for that product or that technology or that procedure, so that you can get that leading indication before it becomes a problem, so that you can address it before the event happens? I think this is really the ultimate quest that we should all pursue with respect to CAPA and with respect to improving our quality management system. Overuse versus underuse, and this is kind of an interesting challenge. And what I've seen in practice is, and I'll tell a short story on this particular case, is there's either overuse, meaning I initiate a CAPA for everything, or I don't use CAPA as much or as robustly as I possibly could. And the short story on the overuse side of things, this goes back quite a few years ago, but I was brought in as a consultant to help a small med device company. They had, a month or so prior gone through an FDA inspection. They had a, quite the laundry list of items to address, from 43 observations and things of that nature. And they needed a little bit more capacity and help and guidance on navigating and addressing those particular issues. One of the areas that we got into as part of this mitigation dealt with their internal auditing practices, and the company had to find within their internal auditing procedures that every single procedure and process within their quality management system was to be audited every year on an annual basis. And this was November-ish timeframe when I was brought in to this engagement, and none of the internal audits had been conducted for that year. So that was a challenge, number one. So they hired another third-party consultant who was tasked with completing all of the internal audits, and that person did all of these internal audits. I think it ended up being around 30, 35 internal audits. The other thing that complicated this with respect to overuse of CAPA is their procedures dictated that anytime there was an internal audit issue or finding, or an external audit issue or finding, regardless of how big, small, or what have you, that any finding during an audit required issuing a CAPA. So you can imagine 35 or so internal audits being conducted. They found stuff. The internal auditor found things. They found issues where procedures weren't being followed or misunderstood, et cetera, et cetera. So by the end of the year, because their procedures dictated this, they had something like another 40 or 50 CAPAs that they had issued because their procedures said, "Thou shalt issue a CAPA for everything." So pretty soon now, this company is, number one, they had all of these issues and observations from an FDA perspective that they were mitigating. They conducted all these internal audits, and now they issued themselves another 40 or 50 CAPAs. So they pretty much buried themselves from just all this work, and it didn't do themselves any favors by this over application of CAPA. The other extreme of this is underuse, where something should be a CAPA and one is not issued for whatever reason. And from my perspective, a CAPA is something that is systemic in nature or has the potential to be systemic in nature. It's not necessarily for a one-off type of event. I'll talk a little bit more about the quality system relationship with CAPA here in a little bit. Root cause, man, this is a really big challenge, I think, for many in the medical device industry, is getting to the root cause. And the challenge with respect to CAPA is a lot of times what people will do when documenting their root cause is they will almost regurgitate or restate the problem statement rather than drill down to find the specific root cause. And there's quite a few different tools and techniques that I would recommend to you with respect to root cause determination. Something like a fishbone diagram. My personal favorite happens to be the 5 whys tool or method to root cause determination. It's my favorite because I think it's the simplest to understand. So much so that I think if you've ever been around a 3-year-old, they already seem to have mastered the 5 whys. And it basically goes like this: if you make a statement about something, you ask the question why, and then you answer that, and then you ask the question why, and so on and so forth until you've asked, quote, 5 whys. in some situations, you may be able to ask 2 whys. In other situations, you might need to continue to drill down 10 into 10 whys. But nonetheless, the 5 whys is a really good methodology to try to hone in on improving the root cause. As shared a moment ago from the FDA 43 observation data from years past, CAPA, lack of or inadequate CAPA process is a very big issue and concern. And I think this is one of those areas that we have an opportunity to certainly improve upon with respect to defining that CAPA process. And this is one of the things that we at Greenlight Guru have taken to heart. As I mentioned on the intro, have built the only medical device quality management system in the world today. It's been designed and developed specifically for the medical device industry. It's been designed and developed by actual medical device professionals. And within that software is a workflow to help you manage your CAPA activities. We built the guardrails, so to speak, so that you can stay compliant, but really help streamline and improve your overall CAPA process. So as I mentioned on the intro, if you're interested in learning more about that, I would encourage you to go to www.greenlight.guru to learn more. All right, so I'm going to ask a polling question, and bear with me. Usually when I ask the polling questions during webinars, I am not the presenter and the moderator, but today I happen to be both. But let's take a quick poll. Which of these 5 CAPA problems does your company struggle with the most? So let me get that queued up here. All right, so we're going to launch this. Everybody take a moment to choose the poll. Not sure if this is working properly. All right, we'll give it a few more seconds. Someone said they can't see the poll. It looks like it has been closed, so I'm not sure. So I tell you what, just we'll come back to that. But if you don't mind, send a challenge or send a comment in the as to which of these challenges you're struggling with. Again, the options are lack of cross functionality. Oh, wait, here we go. Looks like it's rolling now. There's always some form of technical challenge encountered during these things. So we'll give it just a few more seconds. All right. So let's go ahead and close that. Let's see if we can share the results. I don't know if it's going to hide it on or share it on screen or not, but I can actually see the results. So looks like the biggest challenge from those of you that participated in the poll, 48% said your CAPA process is reactive instead of proactive, followed closely by with 44% saying weak root cause determination. Next is 30% said lack of cross functionality. 19% said overuse versus underuse, and then 18% said poorly defined quality processes. So thank you all for participating in that poll. All right, so let's continue on. All right, let's talk now about the relationship between CAPA and some of the other quality management system processes. I mentioned the FDA QSIT guidance document a little bit ago, and this particular image, I like this image a lot, but this has been adapted from that particular QSIT approach. And this is that QSIT is a really good guidance document for a number of reasons, not the least of which is it gives you quite a bit of intel and insight as to how an FDA inspection is like, what that FDA inspector is going to be looking for and how that's going to go if and when your company is exposed to one of those types of events. And it's not too dissimilar from an ISO perspective either, but I think this graphic is really key because it shows the expectation that management has to be the hub of your quality management system and all the related processes. You can see there's this ecosystem that is built, connecting all the different parts and pieces from a quality management system, and CAPA is one of those key pieces. But let's talk a little bit about some relationship between some of these different processes. As I mentioned, CAPA should be, in my opinion and experience, reserved for things that are systemic in nature or have the potential to be systemic in nature. If you have a one-off type of event, that doesn't necessarily indicate that you should issue a CAPA. And the reason is because you have a lot of other supporting quality management system processes that are designed or should be designed such that they are handling these singular types of events. And one of the first ones to consider is customer feedback and complaints. Your complaint handling process should be robust enough so that you are properly investigating the issue, that you're determining the root cause, you're determining an action plan. And one of the interesting things too, if you think about it, the steps in a CAPA investigation, they're very, very similar to a complaint investigation or some of the other processes that we're going to talk about. It's a common methodology where you want to understand what the problem is, the scope of the issue, how widespread is it. You want to do a thorough investigation into how this thing could have happened, determine that root cause, and then take the necessary actions to fix or mitigate or address the particular issue. So if your complaint handling process is not robust enough to be able to do that sort of thing on a singular event, then I would encourage you to reevaluate and possibly revamp your methodology with respect to that. Now, if you have a complaint that continues to happen over and over again, and it is systemic in nature, then absolutely, of course, this is an opportunity to feed it into a bigger CAPA investigation. Or if you see enough of an indicator that says, hey, this has a potential to be a problem down the road and impacts products on the field or our manufacturing, whatever the case may be, then again, those are more systemic issues that should be when you initiate a CAPA for those types of things. Non-conforming products. So during manufacturing, if you're building something and it fails to meet the defined specifications, by definition, that is a non-conforming product. And if you're able to handle this on a one-off basis, then use your non-conforming procedures to document, identify, and address those particular things. Again, CAPA is that systemic level engagement where if this something is a problem consistently over and over again, time and time again, and that sort of thing, then a CAPA. But if it's a one-off, use your non-conforming procedure. Production and process controls is another area where it's, and I think these are opportunities, certainly from a non-conforming perspective, and absolutely from a production and process controls perspective, where we can be. This is an area where we can be more proactive and preventive in nature. Where if we're analyzing our throughput, our effectiveness, and those sorts of things with respect to manufacturing, we have the right controls in place, then we should have some early indicators of potential opportunities for improvement for our devices, for our overall processes, that these might be opportunities for us to issue a CAPA, but do so more on a preventive nature rather than a reactive nature. Supplier management is another thing, especially in this day and age where a lot of us are relying on third-party suppliers for a whole host of things, whether that be raw materials or certain components, parts and pieces, whether we've outsourced your electronic quality management system to somebody like Greenlight Guru, whether or not you've leveraged contract manufacturing, contract design, et cetera, the list goes on and on and on. We should have a robust supplier management practices in place so that we're effectively evaluating and qualifying and monitoring ongoing supplier performance. And there will be things that happen in the relationship with your supplier. Maybe what you received from your supplier was the wrong part. Well, if that happens one time, well, does that necessarily mean that you need to issue a supplier corrective action? Maybe not. But if this becomes a theme or a trend or something that happens over and over and over again, then that might be the opportunity to initiate a supplier related CAPA item. Audit management. I think this is a really great opportunity. What I see a lot in practice a lot of times is companies do not have a very robust internal auditing program. That a lot of times their internal audits are more, I hate to say it, but more like checkbox type activities where they do it because they have to. But internal auditing is a great opportunity for you and your company to really dive in and really try to understand are the people using this particular procedure or engaged in this particular process, are they understanding, is this process effective? Where are there gaps? Where are there opportunities to strengthen that? And I think this is a really great opportunity to really make your business better. From an internal auditing perspective, I coach medical device companies that make your internal auditing more tough, more stringent, more strict. Make it the toughest audit that anybody, your company is ever going to face. Make it tougher than FDA. Make it tougher than ISO, because this is the way that we're going to get better, is through this self-evaluation and being constructively critical about the things that we're doing on a day-to-day basis. I shared that story earlier during when I was talking about overuse versus underuse. Just because you have an internal audit finding of some sort does not necessarily mean that thou shalt issue a CAPA. I think this, in my observation, and working in this industry for 22 years, this is one of the areas that causes that overuse, is that companies think that every time they find something during an audit that it needs to be a CAPA to correct that. Sometimes you find something during an internal audit and a simple change order might address that, or a retraining type of event. So that doesn't necessarily mean that you need to issue a CAPA. Now, if there are bigger issues, of course, absolutely consider a CAPA. And I've seen some companies, they'll differentiate their practices from internal audit findings versus external audit findings. Like if you get an FDA 43 observation or an ISO observation, that might automatically warrant a CAPA investigation. And this is a little bit of a preference thing. Again, I keep going back to think of CAPA as more of systemic issue based. If it's something that I can use another process that I've defined, like change management or training or what have you, then leverage those workflows and those details within those particular procedures. Design controls. This one, I'm a design control nerd. If you've ever heard me on other webinars or the Global Medical Device Podcast, I'm very passionate about design and development of medical devices. If you have a robust design and development practice and processes in place, then it should be its own feedback loop, so to speak. So, you're defining user needs and inputs and outputs and verifying and validating, you've got design reviews, et cetera, et cetera. There should be a means to capture design changes during that process. Now, once you go to market and you're manufacturing this and selling this particular product, design control is still applicable. And if you have some challenges with features or scale up from prototyping to full production, there may be some design control items that are identified that need to be addressed in some way, shape, or form. Well, if you can do so within your design control construct and framework, well, then do it within that framework. If it's something that's a bigger issue, then there might be an opportunity to evaluate a CAPA investigation to fix that. Management review. Management review is really these glimpses or moments in time where I showed you that QSIT diagram a few slides back, where management was at the center of that image, so to speak. And management and review are moments in time where the executive management and other key personnel within your company are assessing and evaluating the health and the robustness of your entire quality management system. And if you believe what FDA says in their QSIT guidance document, that CAPA is a glimpse or look into the health of a quality management system, then CAPA becomes a pretty important part of a management review. But in addition to CAPA, you're really looking at all your other key processes as well. Things like complaints, things like internal audits, things like non-conformances, and so on and so forth. So there's definitely a strong relationship and a part that CAPA plays with respect to management review. Risk management. Oh man, this is such a deep topic on a number of fronts. I mean, with respect to design and development of design and development of medical devices, there's certainly a strong emphasis put on risk management at those points in time, as defined in 14971, which, by the way, about a year ago, there was a revision published to 14971, the 2019 version. So if you haven't, be sure you go to check that out. The other concept that was introduced to us in 1345 2016 is this notion of a risk-based quality management system and risk-based approaches. And I think that's really important when making a decision as to whether or not we should issue a CAPA, is to apply a risk-based decision-making process. And then if you have a CAPA, what you do about it and whether or not further action is required. Risk should be really the center of that entire decision-making process about what to do, when to do it, how to do it, and those sorts of things. So certainly if you need a little bit of help or guidance on constructing or formulating risk-based approaches with CAPA and with respect to other quality management system practices, be sure to reach out to us. We have a lot of experience with this and certainly can be a resource that you can lean on. But on the topic of risk, let's talk a little bit more in depth and detail about the impact risk management has on CAPA. Again, CAPA for systemic issues. As I mentioned, there is risk implications at a number of different levels, including, but not holistically, this is not a comprehensive list, but design, the design-related challenges or opportunities for improvement with your products, your processes, and whether that be manufacturing processes or other processes that you've defined within your business. But then also suppliers. So these are some key areas that risk-based approaches should be applied and evaluated and assessed and determined if you have the right level of controls and details in place with respect to that. The whole idea of being a risk-based quality management system, again, it was a newer concept that was formalized in the 2016 version of 1345. And even before that was formalized in that particular standard, I think this was the intent or the methodology that a lot of medical device professionals were already applying at some level anyway. We may not have always called it risk-based approach, but understanding the criticality and the impact that a particular issue or potential issue might have on your product process or potentially even the patient. I think these are really key things to factor in. Again, our mission as medical device professionals is to improve the quality of life. We want to make sure that the products that we're designing and developing and manufacturing and selling into the marketplace are as safe and effective as they can possibly be for addressing whatever challenge or intended use that we've intended them for. So continuing to keep that really at the center of your universe as a medical device professional is really, really, really key. And this will drive the best decision-making process. If you're doing what's best for patient, then chances are what decisions you make will be the great decisions. It'll be the best for that patient is how I operate as a medical device professional and have for well over 20 years, because
This is why I am passionate about being in this industry, is we get to actually shape in a good way the quality of life. And that's an awesome, awesome feeling. But just taking actions on certain things and making sure that you're addressing challenges or opportunities and even being proactive, that may not just that just may not be enough. And you want to make sure that those things that you're doing to improve upon your products and processes, that they actually work. And we'll talk a little bit about the steps in going through a CAPA, but verifying and demonstrating that those things, those actions that you've took were actually effective is really, really important to kind of close that loop, so to speak. So how do we shift from being reactive to proactive? Again, we always seem to have time to fix a problem that's happened. We're not always incented or motivated, right, wrong, or indifferent, to try to get ahead of things, to see what things are, or what leading indicators could indicate that there might be a challenge down the road. But this is our challenge as an industry: is how can we put more emphasis in being more proactive? And I mentioned I am a design control nerd. From a product design perspective, to me, that's the best opportunities when I'm going through the design and development process is be as holistic and comprehensive as possible, not just focus on the design and development of the particular device that I'm interested in producing, but look at what else is out there. Are there other products that are similar to, competitive products, et cetera, that maybe they've had some issues with some, particular feature or material or functionality or what have you? I should be going to those sources of information to understand what others who brought products to market before me, what challenges that they were facing. And there's a wealth of knowledge in a lot of different regulatory databases, like specifically like the FDA MAUDE database has a lot of information, and I can search by my particular product code or my indication for use, and I can see what other challenges others have already faced and use that as an input to my design and development process. So to me, the best way to be proactive at preventing issues with your product specifically comes into play when you're going through the design control practice and design and development processes. Again, I think a lot of the emphasis on reacting to situations has a lot to do with a compliance-based mindset. And I think we're at a point in 2020 where we have to shift that focus. Instead of just trying to check a box to satisfy an FDA inspector, an ISO auditor. We have to get ahead of that. Compliance it's the bare minimum to stay out of trouble, if you will, with regulators. Is that what we're trying to do? No, I think what we're trying to do is make the safest, most effective products that we possibly can. So we have to embrace this new way of looking at things. And I know it sounds a little cliche perhaps, but we have to embrace more of a true quality mindset in everything that we do as medical device professionals. And if we can get to that true quality mindset and we can build a culture of quality within our organization, then I think that's going to help us, certainly from a CAPA perspective, be more proactive in our methodology and approach. There's kind of two competing schools of thought, so to speak, with respect to like manufacturing. One is the cost of poor quality. How much does it cost if you have to continually fix issues? What is that cost associated with that? And then the other competing piece is the cost of quality. What is the cost of quality? Or maybe better stated, what is the value of quality? So there's a lot of great information that's out there on these two concepts. If you'd like some more details about different resources on cost of quality, cost of poor quality, feel free to send me a note and I'll share some of the things that I'm aware of. Speaking of making that shift, true quality, it's what it's all about. We have to get to a point where this becomes ingrained as part of our day-to-day culture within our companies. So let's wrap things up today and talk a little bit about CAPA process step by step. There's about a handful or a couple handfuls of steps, if you will, that are involved in this. That when you identify a systemic issue that is a candidate for a CAPA, the first thing that should be involved in your process, the first step, is initiating that request. and that request should be submitted to review. That review probably should be, going back to one of the problems with CAPAs is a lot of companies, eh, that review goes through a singular function, oftentimes quality. And this is an opportunity to embrace some of the cross functionality. You may have a team. I've seen some folks, they have or some companies, they have a initiative called their MRB, Management Review Board. I've even seen it called CAPA Review Board. There might be a number of quality review boards. There's quite a few names that may be attributed to that. I think that's a really good practice, so that these requests get submitted, and that particular review board makes a determination of, or an assessment as to, whether or not this should be initiated as a CAPA. So once that CAPA has been reviewed, there's a decision whether or not to issue it. So you accept or reject, and if it's accepted, then issue and initiate the CAPA. Once you've issued that CAPA, then it's really important to understand the scope. What processes or what products or what suppliers or what resources. So define that scope in the form of sources. What are all the potential sources that are part of this particular CAPA investigation that you decided to take on? And then, step 6, it's all about that cross-functional team. Once you understand the scope, what products, what processes, who, what, when, et cetera, then this helps inform who should be a part of that CAPA team. And I think one other note on CAPA teams and staffing and resources for this, a lot of times we as companies, we don't factor in that we might have CAPAs that require staffing from a resource perspective. Like, for example, if you're an engineer designing and developing new products, you're probably spending all or the vast majority of your time on designing and developing new products. If something that you designed and developed as an engineer 6 months ago is now part of a CAPA investigation, you're probably a pretty good resource to be involved in that CAPA team. However, your boss or the way your company is organized may not factor that in as part of your workflow or your bandwidth. So these are things to think about as a business, and this is why it's better to be more proactive rather than reactive, because if that product that you introduced 6 months ago now has a problem, and you have to pull an engineer off of a new project, a new development, to mitigate and address this product problem, then obviously that engineer is not going to be as productive on designing and developing a new product. They're going to be pulled into or sucked into this CAPA to correct an issue that has occurred. So just think about that as you're designing your processes and allocating resources, that it's good to factor in that there may be some CAPAs that people outside of quality need to be involved with. And so do your quality team huge justice and favor, and make sure that you're providing them with the resources that are necessary, because those other resources probably have a lot more intelligence and information and knowledge about that particular issue than anyone else in your organization. So step number 7, first thing, once you identify the need for a CAPA, once you start to get into this and you know how the scope and you've got this team defined, is you want to contain this. You don't want this to continue to be an issue or problem. So what are any immediate actions or corrections that I need to take right now so that this doesn't continue to happen with product in the field or manufacturing or whatever the case may be? So what are those immediate actions? And take those immediate actions as soon as you possibly can. Now I want to do a proper investigation. I want to try to understand, how did this thing happen? How did it manifest? What were the steps that occurred to lead to this point in time where we are? And once I do that investigation, what did I find? What did I learn? Capture all of this information, because knowing this will really help me do a much better, more thorough job in identifying root causes. And yeah, I think a lot of issues can have multiple root causes, and this can be a really tricky exercise from time to time. If you're just doing it without a proper investigation, then what you'll likely experience or see is that theme that I mentioned before, where I'm just restating the issue. That's not really a root cause. Again, embrace some of the tools that are out there. Fishbone, 5 whys, even things like fault trees, sometimes failure modes. These are all really great tools that can help you leverage the investigation and the findings from that investigation so that you can drill down into the root cause. Because without knowing the root cause, it makes it really hard to take the appropriate necessary actions to prevent this from being an issue down the road. Which steps 10 and 11 really are. Step 10 is about identifying that specific plan of action. What are all the things that I need to do now that I understand from my investigation and my findings how this occurred, and I determine from a root cause perspective how this manifested to begin with. What steps do I need to take to make sure that, to my best ability, that this doesn't ever happen again? So what are all those plans, whether that be updating procedures, redesigning a product, refining your manufacturing process, implementing more inspection steps, whatever the case may be. Your CAPA action plan should be thorough, should be robust, should be holistic and comprehensive in nature. And then obviously once you define that plan, you need to complete that plan. And this is, again, where cross-functionality is a key piece, because each of the actions that are identified may be completed by different functional areas depending on what those actions are. And then, getting toward the wrap-up of a CAPA step by step, I'm going to review that CAPA for completeness. I want to make sure that, whether that's that MRB or CAPA review board or quality review board, whomever the case may be, however I've defined that. Again, ideally, I want some cross-functionality incorporated in this step too, but I want to make sure that the plan, that the actions, that the root cause, that this is complete, and then move forward with approving those actions. And then the last couple of steps in a CAPA process, I need to verify in some way, shape, or another that all of those actions that I took, that they were actually effective. Like if I said, oh, well, one of my actions was manufacturing person needs to be retrained, they didn't understand this. So maybe I had an action task in my CAPA to retrain that person. I need to verify that retraining was in fact effective. So I need to think about what task do I need to create to demonstrate that it was actually effective. And I need to do that for all of my actions identified in that CAPA plan. All right, so again, here are the 15 steps. Again, you'll have the slide deck in your inbox probably later today, but 15 steps in a CAPA process. So we've been going for almost an hour as promised, and now we're at the point in time where I'd be happy and thrilled to answer as many questions as we can get to today. So let me pop out these questions and let's dive right in. So again, thank you all so much for taking time out of your busy schedules to go through this and listen to some tips and pointers with respect to CAPA. All right, so just scouring through this. So Sunitha asks, so does it mean for the 5 why root cause analysis method, 5 reasons have not to be always documented? All right, so I think what Sunitha is asking, so let me explain the 5 whys again. 5 whys is just a methodology. I believe, don't quote me on this, but I believe it was first identified by the Toyota organization several decades ago. And the gist of the 5 whys methodology is that I keep asking why. So let's see if I can do a kind of a brief example. So a piece broke on my device. Okay, so then why? Well, because the tensile strength was less than the force that it was being applied in the procedure. Why? Well, because I didn't understand the requirements. Okay, why? And so you keep asking yourself why until you can get to a point where it's a root cause. So that's the idea behind this. It doesn't necessarily mean that you have to have 5 reasons. You just keep asking the question why until you're satisfied and your team's satisfied that, okay, we've honed in or identified a potential root cause here. All right, a couple questions about the poll, and I'm glad we all got that figured out. Bandula states CAPA should be replaced by PAPA, or I've even heard PACA. Maybe we should put more emphasis on the PA side and put it in front of the CA side for sure. Bandula extends that PAPA, proactive preventive action. I like it, Bandula. That's a really good term. Let's see, Aaron says on point 3 and specific to overuse, is it your opinion that companies should implement a tiered CAPA systems where issues like product escapes go through a full CAPA, whereas internally identified issues would go through a more streamlined CAPA process? And that's a really interesting concept and idea. I have a couple of thoughts on that. This is what I'm probably going to think about. So, Aaron, feel free to send me a note. I'd love to pick your brain a little bit more on this topic. Maybe we can find 15 to 20 minutes to have a phone conversation in the next few days or so. But my thought is this: I think this is the benefit of some of the other processes that we have within our quality management system. Like if I have a product issue, I should have well-defined practices in place to receive and assess and evaluate customer feedback and complaints and things of that nature. So I should be able to use that for those issues. Whereas CAPA is for more of the bigger deal issues, more of the systemic issues. But I'm kind of thinking about your suggestion here that there might be different levels or complexity, and I think that can be defined within my specific CAPA action plan, all the things that I identify. But really thought-provoking question, Aaron. And like I said, I would absolutely appreciate having an opportunity to chat with you a little bit further about that. All right, so Christina asked, what is the difference between CAPA and nonconformance procedures? And I'm going to speculate a little bit about where Christina might be going with this. So technically speaking, if I go through an audit and something about my practices do not comply with the regulatory requirements, then that can be viewed as a nonconformance. When I was speaking about nonconformance earlier, I was specifically intended to focus on non-conforming products. So I go through my manufacturing process, building my device per my defined specifications, and during the manufacturing, my product fails to meet that defined specification. Well, that would be a candidate for a non-conforming product. So I know sometimes the words get used in multiple different scenarios. All right, question from Becky. Is it a hard and fast requirement that each action in a CAPA must have an effectiveness check, or can this be approached on a case-by-case basis? All right, great question, Becky. The hard and fast expectation or requirement with respect to a CAPA is I need to demonstrate that the actions that I take to mitigate the issue identified and investigated and addressed as part of that CAPA, that they are in fact effective. Now, there's certainly levels of gray to this. It doesn't necessarily mean that every single action needs an effectiveness check, but I think it's more about the scope of this particular CAPA investigation. I need to verify that what I did to correct the issue or to prevent the issue was in fact effective in doing so, that I don't have repeat offenses, if you will. This is one of the big challenges that a lot of companies have, is that they're quick to go through a CAPA, almost like they're focusing on it from a more of a compliance mindset, like they're just trying to, fix this procedure and update this and retrain that person and those sorts of things. But they didn't, always get to the root cause. They may just be treating symptoms, if you will, or observations, putting band-aids on things, so to speak, but they didn't actually get to the root cause. So then, lo and behold, a week or maybe a month, but some time passes and then the issue happens again. So if you have repeat CAPAs for the same offense, so to speak, then that would be a red flag that says your CAPA is not effective. So that's what we're trying to address with effectiveness checks, is to make sure that we've effectively verified that all of those things, that those actions that we took worked, and that it prevented that from becoming a problem again. All right, and folks, I apologize if I mispronounce your name in any way. I should have said that on the onset when reading the question. So, Edge, I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing your name correctly, but Edge asks, are there any mandatory roles in the CAPA team? Risk manager, quality manager, etc., must be available in the CAPA meetings sessions. In my experience, there's usually some functional area that is an owner of the CAPA process. Oftentimes it happens to be with a part of the quality organization. It doesn't necessarily have to be. I think the key thing about a CAPA team is that people participating on a particular CAPA team should be appropriate based on the issue that's being addressed. You know, you're trying to understand the scope, what products, what processes, et cetera, are impacted by this. Well, the CAPA team should be able to represent those different areas of scope that you identified. And then as you know, your investigation unfolds, you may identify additional roles or functions that need to participate in that, and that's okay. The CAPA team can be somewhat fluid. I think having you know, quality involved it makes great sense at some level. Having, you know, someone who is a risk manager, I think that's also an excellent suggestion. And then the other areas, depending on what the nature of it is, if it has to deal with, you know, in some way, shape, or form, the design of a device, well, you know, you should probably have some design engineering resources. If it has to deal with particular manufacturing process, well, you should probably have folks from that area. If it has to do with suppliers, well, you should probably have someone from supplier management or maybe even purchasing involved. So the team isn't always a one size fits all for every CAPA. It should be somewhat fluid and flexible depending on the situation of each individual CAPA. Great question though. Brenda asks, what is my viewpoint on 8D methodology for root cause analysis? Brenda, I'll be honest, I don't have a ton of firsthand experience on the 8D methodology. The point of any methodology or tool that you use for root cause, there's no silver bullet here. There's no one size fits all. You know, if you have great experience with the 8D methodology and it's helping you and your team get to the root cause, then keep using the AD. I just happen to have a preference toward the 5 whys because in my experience, that's usually one of the simplest, easiest to understand methodologies. But if you're having great experience with the AD methodology, then go do it. I mean, I know people that love fishbone diagrams. I know other teams that really love a fault tree analysis or even an FMEA. You know, pick the tool that works best for your situation and for your company and that sort of thing. So if it's 8D, then congratulations, that's awesome. Thank you for sharing. Lesia states, if our CAPA system is relatively immature, where would I concentrate my efforts? Lesia, I would say that you know, if your CAPA system is immature, I don't know if I'm speculating a little bit here. I don't know if that also means that your quality management system is also somewhat immature as well, or if this is a new practice. But either way, if CAPA is a glimpse or a view into the health of your quality management system and a view into your overall business health, then one of the things that I would encourage you to do is maybe be a little bit more deliberate or intentional about doing some more internal audits with respect to your CAPAs. You know, there's nothing that says or prevent you from initiating multiple internal audits throughout the year or whatever the case may be. But maybe have an internal audit that does an assessment of and looks at a number of different CAPAs that have been issued and really drills down into that. That would be one particular area that could help identify what's going well, what can be improved, et cetera. And again, I don't know how frequently you're doing management reviews. Um, the criteria, the thou shalt from a management review indicates that you should do this at least on an annual basis. But there's nothing that says you can't do this more frequently. For growing companies who are growing their quality management system and with less mature practices around CAPA and other quality management system aspects, I encourage companies to do management review maybe a few times a year, maybe even quarterly. I think if you do it more than quarterly, it gets a little bit noisy and maybe loses a little bit of its value. But I think just having ways that you can check in from time to time to assess what's going well and how are people understanding. I think those are some good ways to try to uh, focus your efforts on improving your overall CAPA system. All right, so we got time for, I'm just doing a little time check. I know we're got a few more minutes for questions. So Dan asked, if we're using mod as an input to design controls as preventive action, am I saying that should be a CAPA? No, not necessarily required you to issue a CAPA in this case, Dan. All I was implying with evaluating the mod database is that this could be an input to strengthen and improve upon your design and development processes, and that this could be a preventive measure for ensuring that your device is as robust, safe, and effective as it can possibly be. I don't think it's necessary in that particular case to issue a CAPA for that event. I think just consider mod as an input, as our standards, as our regulations, as our users and customers and engineers and regulatory. It's just an input into your design and development process. Ramesh asked, can we use 8D and FDA? Ramesh, I'm not aware of anything that says you can't. I think the key thing about 8D or any other tool that you use is that it's effective at helping you identify root cause. In my experience and to my knowledge, FDA is not prescriptive on which tools you can and can't use. Their expectation is that you're meeting the intent of the regulations. So if 8D works for you and helps you effectively identify root cause, then go for it. Michelle asks, senior management wants to enter a CAPA for issues that occur, but only wants to implement a retraining for a corrective action. Any advice? I don't know all the intricate details here. My advice, though, is training is one of those areas that can trip up a lot of companies. It's hard to say that you only need retraining for only corrective actions. It seems also that preventive action would also have potential training ramifications. The way I think about it is just about anything that we're going to change or update for whatever reason, whether it's a corrective action or preventive action or just an opportunity for improvement, there's a very good chance that if we're changing something, there is some sort of training impact at some way, shape, or form, or some level. So training is probably applicable to more than just corrective actions, Michelle. All right, well, let's tackle a couple more questions. And I see a lot of great questions. Thank you all for chiming in and asking these great questions. So Kurt asked, when do you consider a CAPA closed? After the action plan is implemented or after the V&V activities? Kurt, I think this can be a matter of semantics and a matter of preference. What I've seen in some practice is that a CAPA may have multiple points in time where there's some level of sign off on certain activities, that there may be some level of sign off. And I'm not saying that this is what you have to do. I'm just keeping it open to you to think about what makes the most sense for your company and your internal practices. But the key, I guess the key thing is making sure that what you do within the scope of a CAPA and the actions that you take and implement. Key things is that it's holistic and comprehensive, that the right resources were involved in the review and approval of that, and that you've confirmed that the actions that you took were effective. I've seen a lot of companies, they will implement multiple gates, if you will, or sign-offs or review points in between various stages of a CAPA. Like I've seen some cases where there might be a review step added to confirm or to sign off on the root cause, or there might be yet another sign off that's implemented once the action plan is identified. There might be a sign off to say, yes, this is the appropriate action plan, proceed. And then there might be yet another step involved where there's a review and approval after the actions are completed. So any and all of those are appropriate, as long as somewhere in that process there is the right level of within your company, the right roles, the right functional areas, et cetera, that are involved in saying, yes, this CAPA is complete and comprehensive, and yes, we've confirmed and verified that those activities are effective. All right, well, let's see, one more question here. Trying to pick a good one here. So let's go with Narav's question. Narav states ISO 13485 2016 asks that corrective and preventive action should be appropriate to the risk, and it separates out corrective and preventive actions as two separate entities. When it comes to handling low-level corrective actions in another system, such as NCR or audit, versus bringing to CAPA system, how is it best to do that? Narav, whether your action is corrective or preventive in nature, the general process that one goes through is, for all intents and purposes, the same process, the same methodology. The key difference is what happens, what was the triggering event, what happens to cause you to take on this investigation. And that's where, the corrective versus preventive nature should come in play, or the reactive versus proactive nature should come into play. If my triggering event is almost entirely dependent on waiting until something happens, then by nature, I've made this a corrective or reactive situation. Ways for me to be proactive are to go solicit and feedback from the use, and do things like internal audits and gather intel about what's happening with other maybe even competitive products in the marketplace. So what happens on the front end, that triggering event, is really what dictates whether or not something is corrective or preventive in nature. So, ladies and gentlemen, thank you all so much for taking your time to participate in today's webinar on how to implement and maintain a modern CAPA system while avoiding common pitfalls. And thank you all so much for these terrific questions. As I mentioned, a replay and slide deck will be landing in your inbox very, very soon, probably even yet today, certainly before the end of the week. So stay tuned for the next webinar coming your way here very, very soon from Greenlight Guru. Topic, I don't know what it is, to be honest, right now, but if this is your first webinar with Greenlight Guru, pay attention. We will do another webinar just about every month or so. So lots of great information, as well as our #1 podcast in the medical device industry, the Global Medical Device Podcast, as well as all the content and articles that you can find on the Greenlight Guru website. And yes, of course, if you want some help and assistance on fine-tuning and refining and revamping your approach to CAPA, uh, we'd love to talk to you. Go to www.greenlight.guru to learn more about the medical device quality management systems platform that we've built and implemented at hundreds and hundreds of companies all over the globe. As always, this is your founder at Greenlight Guru, John Spear, and thank you so much for your participation today.